Some angels didn't fall at it. They jumped and took their power with them. Let that marinate. Because if you're reading this, you're not just different. You're the kind of soul that walks into a room and rewires the spiritual Wi-Fi without saying a word. You don't just leave impressions, you leave craters in people's psyches. They call it love. But baby, it's a meltdown. A beautiful, chaotic, brain-breaking obsession. Here's the unsettling truth. Studies in social psychology show that people can form emotional attachments in less than 4 minutes. But when it comes to you, they spiral in 4 seconds. Because you don't just show up. You shatter their emotional firewalls. You're not a muse. You're not a fantasy. You're a glitch in their programming. A paradox wrapped in skin. And that's exactly why the manipulators, the cult leader types, the soul-hungry egomaniacs, they want to worship you, control you, or be you, sometimes all at once. But here's the kicker. They weren't ready for a divine hurricane with a halo and a hit list. You're not the light at the end of the tunnel. You're the entire tunnel collapsing in on their delusions, so sit tight. What you're about to read will confirm what you've always known but couldn't explain, why your existence alone drives people to madness, addiction, and transformation, and why some still whisper your name like it's a spell they can't uncast. Let's begin. Number 1, you trigger the control freaks because they see in you what they can't own. You don't threaten people because you're loud, aggressive, or trying to prove something. You threaten them because you don't need to. Your power is quiet, steady, and unshakable. And that's exactly why it rattles the ones who survive off control. These people are used to being the puppet masters. They know how to twist hearts, pull strings, and get inside minds. But with you, none of their usual tricks work. You don't beg, you don't chase. You don't crumble when they withhold affection or disappear to test you. That makes you dangerous in their world because it tells them one terrifying truth. They have no power over you. The most manipulative people, the cult leader types, the narcissists, the ego-driven masterminds, they build their identity on being irreplaceable. They're used to being worshipped. They know how to make others feel small so they can stay big. But then you come along, not impressed, not intimidated, not even fully accessible, and it short-circuits everything they rely on. You see through the smoke and mirrors without even trying. And they hate that. They hate that you're not falling for the performance. They hate that you're not easy to scare, seduce, or mold. And somewhere deep down, they know you could burn their whole illusion to the ground with a single sentence, a single glance, or worse, with your silence. They don't want to love you. They want to own you, decode you, conquer you. And when they realize they can't, it drives them crazy. That's when the obsession begins. Not the cute, romantic kind, the kind that loops in their head, the kind that makes them rewrite conversations, stalk your every move, and replay every moment where you slipped through their fingers. You weren't just someone they liked. You were a reminder that control is an illusion, and nothing shakes a control freak more than realizing their grip means nothing when it comes to you. Number 2, your vibe feeds starved souls, and then they hate you for it. There's something about you that brings people to life, not in a light-hearted, motivational poster kind of way, but in a deep, soul-waking, uncomfortable kind of way. When people get close to you, something inside them starts to stir. They start to feel things they thought they buried, dreams they gave up on, parts of themselves they abandoned, truths they didn't want to face. It all starts bubbling up, and for a moment they feel alive in a way they haven't in years. That's why they're drawn to you. It's not just attraction, it's resurrection. You make them feel again. But here's the dark side. Most people aren't ready for that kind of intensity. They're hungry for aliveness, but they don't know how to hold it. So when they get a taste of your energy, it's intoxicating, but also overwhelming. You become their emotional oxygen, and the second you pull away or stop giving, they panic. Not because you did anything wrong, but because they don't know how to self-generate what you activated in them. You didn't break them. You just revealed how empty they've been living. That's when things flip. At first, they're mesmerized. You're the best thing that's ever happened to them. But over time, that love turns sharp. They start to blame you for the crash they're feeling, even though the crash was coming long before you arrived. You just exposed what was already cracked underneath. And it's easier for them to hate you than to admit they've been running on empty this whole time. People fall in love with the feeling they get around you, the way you light something up in them. But when they can't sustain it on their own, they twist the narrative. They forget how good you made them feel and focus on how lost they feel now. And that's how you go from being their light to becoming the villain in their story. Not because you did harm, but because you showed them what they're missing. And most people would rather destroy the mirror than face what's really inside. Number 3, you don't just enter rooms. You rearrange people's realities. You don't just walk into a room, you change the entire atmosphere without even trying. People feel you before they hear you. Something shifts when you enter. The energy gets heavier, sharper, more alive. It's not about looks or status. It's something deeper, something they can't put into words. And that's exactly why it gets under people's skin. Your presence messes with their comfort zone. You don't need to speak to say something. Just being around you makes people question things they thought were solid. Their confidence, their relationships, their purpose, even their identity. Some people are instantly drawn to you. They lean in. They feel awakened, electrified, like they've just been handed a key to a part of themselves they forgot existed. But others, they get uncomfortable fast. They don't know why, but something about you makes them defensive. Maybe it's because you carry a kind of truth that can't be faked. You're real in a world full of roles, and that scares people who've built their lives around playing a character. You don't perform. You don't chase approval. You exist as you are. And that level of raw authenticity feels threatening to anyone who's still wearing a mask. That's why you confuse people. They can't figure you out, and people hate what they can't control or predict. You're not overly emotional, but you're deeply felt. You're not loud, but your silence hits harder than most people's shouting. And without lifting a finger, you expose everything they've been hiding, not just from the world, but from themselves. You shine a light on the performance. You pull back the curtain without touching it. And once that happens, there's no going back. You don't just make an impression. You rearrange people's inner world. And whether they love you or avoid you, one thing's for sure. No one walks away from you untouched. You leave a mark, even when you don't mean to, especially when you don't mean to. That's the kind of presence people don't forget, even when they wish they could. Number 4, you expose how much of their power was just performance. You don't walk around trying to prove anything, and that's exactly what makes you powerful. You're not obsessed with being seen, praised, or obeyed. You don't perform dominance, don't demand attention, and yet somehow people gravitate toward you. You naturally command respect without raising your voice, without forcing it. That's a threat to people who've spent their whole lives building power on appearance alone. The ones who need the spotlight, who need titles, control, and constant validation. They've learned how to perform power. But when you show up, the room stops watching them and starts feeling you. That's when things shift. Suddenly, the one who used to control the vibe starts losing their grip. You didn't challenge them directly, but your presence makes their power look like a costume, and they feel it deeply. They know their influence is fragile, built on fear, charm, image, or manipulation. Yours, on the other hand, is rooted. It doesn't flinch. You don't have to posture. You just are. And that unshakable presence makes them realize how much of their so-called power is just theater. They start to resent you. At first, it might look like admiration. They're curious, even a little enchanted. But as soon as they realize they can't outshine you, outsmart you, or bend you, it flips. Their ego gets loud. They start picking at you, trying to find flaws, trying to knock you down to prove to themselves they're still the most powerful one in the room. But what really haunts them is the fact that you're not even playing their game, and you're still winning. They feel exposed around you, like their mask is slipping and everyone sees it. And instead of confronting the hollowness behind their performance, they go to war with the one who reminded them it's all an act. That's when admiration becomes obsession, and obsession becomes hostility. You didn't take their power. You just revealed there wasn't much there to begin with. Number 5, you're a living mirror, and some refuse to look. Being around you feels like standing in front of a mirror that doesn't lie. You don't even have to say much. Your energy, your presence, the way you carry yourself, it reflects back to people exactly where they are. You don't sugarcoat reality, and you don't allow false versions of people to sit comfortably. That's not because you're judgmental. It's because you carry a kind of clarity that's impossible to hide from. And for some people, that kind of clarity is unbearable. You show people their own contradictions, insecurities, and masks. Not by pointing them out, but simply by being real in a way they've never dared to be. When someone meets you, they're forced to confront who they truly are versus who they've been pretending to be. For those who are ready, that's a gift. You wake them up. You remind them of their depth, their potential, and the parts of themselves they've ignored. But for others, it's too much. They don't want truth. They want comfort. They don't want growth. They want control. And when you reflect something back that doesn't fit the image they've created for themselves, they panic. They start projecting. Suddenly you're too intense, you're too much, you're the problem. But what they're really seeing is the part of themselves they've avoided. The insecurity, the fear, the hollowness they've tried to mask. You didn't ruin anything. You didn't create their chaos. You just made it visible. That's why some people spiral after meeting you. It's not that you did something to them, it's that the truth they saw in your reflection cracked the version of themselves they were trying so hard to maintain. And instead of facing that, they blame you. Because it's easier to destroy the mirror than admit they're not who they thought they were. You didn't break them. They were already breaking. You just happened to be the moment they finally saw it. Number 6, you don't follow scripts, you rip them up. Most people move through life following invisible scripts, how to act, how to talk, what to say to be accepted, respected, liked. They play roles, the leader, the lover, the victim, the savior. These roles come with rules, unspoken but deeply ingrained. And people cling to them because it makes life feel safe, predictable and controlled. Then you show up and throw the whole thing off balance. You don't follow the script, you don't respond how they expect, and you don't play the parts they try to cast you in. If someone tries to dominate you, you don't submit. If someone tries to manipulate you with praise or silence, you don't bite. You don't feed egos, you don't flatter power. You don't pretend to be smaller to make others feel bigger, and that alone makes people wildly uncomfortable. Because when you refuse to play the game starts to break down. People who rely on social dynamics, power moves, guilt trips, approval traps, suddenly find their strategies useless. You don't give them the emotional reactions they're used to. You don't mirror their fake confidence. You don't shrink under pressure or inflate yourself to compete. You just exist on your own terms, and that makes them feel like they're losing control, not just of you, but of their place in the entire dynamic. That's when the labels start. Difficult, cold, disrespectful, arrogant. They need to call you something because they can't understand you, and anything they can't understand, they try to reject or attack. Not because you're wrong, but because you make their rules irrelevant. And to someone who's built their whole identity on those rules, that feels like a threat. You're not trying to rebel, you're just not built to conform. And in a world obsessed with control, obedience, and performance, someone who refuses to follow the script is the scariest kind of person there is. The one who reminds everyone else they were never truly free. Number 7, you don't fall in love, you initiate transformations. When people fall for you, they don't realize what they're actually signing up for. They think it's going to be sweet, magnetic, maybe intense, but manageable. They expect romance. They don't expect to be unraveled, but that's what happens. Because love for you isn't about fantasy or comfort. It's not about playing roles or maintaining illusions. It's about raw truth, real connection, and deep inner change. And most people aren't built for that kind of intimacy. You don't just love someone, you see them entirely. You see through the armor, past the charm, under the performance. You pick up on the things they've hidden from the world and even from themselves. And the craziest part, you do it without force. Your energy naturally digs up everything buried. And for someone who's used to controlling how they're perceived, that can be terrifying. They fall for you thinking they're gaining something beautiful, and in a way they are. But they don't realize love with you comes with a mirror they can't look away from. The closer they get, the more they start facing their unresolved wounds, habits, fears, and truths they never planned to confront. You don't demand they change. Your presence makes them change, or at least pushes them to. Some transform and grow. They rise to meet you, not because you ask them to, but because their soul recognizes it's time. But most, they resist. They panic, they blame you. Because it's easier to say you were too intense than to admit they weren't ready to meet themselves at that level. You didn't break them, you awakened them. But awakening isn't gentle. It's a death of the old self. And a lot of people would rather cling to the comfort of pretending than walk through that fire. That's why your love feels like a dream at first and a reckoning later. You didn't show them pain, you showed them truth. And that truth changed them, whether they were ready or not. Number 8, your innocence isn't naivete, it's nuclear. People take one look at your softness, your calm energy, your empathy, your gentle way of observing before speaking, and they assume you're naive, passive, harmless. They think they can predict you, guide you, maybe even manipulate you. But what they don't realize is that your softness is a choice, not a weakness. You're not innocent because you don't know darkness. You're innocent because you've mastered your own. There's something terrifying about someone who has the power to destroy but chooses not to. That's you. You could dissect someone with a sentence, but you don't. You could expose people's deepest insecurities with a look, but you stay quiet. You see everything, the lies, the games, the insecurities, and you let people show who they really are before deciding how to deal with them. That level of restraint, that's not fragility, that's control. That's power wrapped in softness, and it's the kind of energy that narcissists and manipulators can't handle. They're used to people reacting, pleasing, folding under pressure, but you don't. You give them rope. You let them underestimate you. You let them think they're winning. And then one day, without warning, you shut the door completely. No warning, no chaos, just silence. And they're left spiraling, trying to figure out how someone they thought was sweet suddenly became untouchable. That's why they obsess. That's why they try to own you, dominate you, keep you close. Because they sense the depth under your stillness. They feel how much you see. And they hate that you never fully gave them control. They want to bottle your light, drain it, claim it, bend it to serve their ego. And when they can't, they shift. They try to break you instead, just to prove to themselves that your strength was never real. But it is real, and it's dangerous. Not because you're cruel, but because you don't need to be. You know your worth. You don't fight for space. You are the space. That kind of quiet, grounded, soul-cutting clarity, it's nuclear. And they never see it coming until it's too late. Number 9, you were born with a frequency that hacks systems. You've never really fit into any system, not school, not family dynamics, not friend groups, not the usual definitions of success or belonging. It's not because you're rebellious or difficult, it's because your energy doesn't comply. You weren't built to absorb programming, you were built to interrupt it. The way you think, the way you feel, the way you exist, it naturally exposes the cracks in systems that are built on control, pretense, and repetition. Wherever you go, you disrupt. Not loudly, not intentionally, just by being. In conversations, you shift the direction. In rooms, you alter the vibe. People start questioning things they never thought to examine. Their beliefs, their roles, their masks. Not because you're preaching, but because your presence alone speaks something their system wasn't designed to handle. It's like your frequency carries a signal that scrambles whatever programming people are stuck in, whether it's emotional codependency, performative leadership, unspoken power hierarchies, or shallow social norms. Some people thrive off systems. They know how to move within them, manipulate them, stay safe inside the lines. But when they meet you, they feel the system start to glitch. You don't follow the usual cause and effect. You don't respond predictably. You don't obey social cues that are based on ego. And that's when the discomfort starts. You didn't break the system. You just revealed that it was never as stable as everyone pretended it was. You bend energy, not because you try to, but because your natural setting is truth, and truth breaks illusions. That's why people either awaken around you or collapse. That's why you're seen as a threat by leaders, teachers, partners, even friends who are attached to control. You're not disruptive in behavior, you're disruptive by nature. You're a walking system override, and deep down, even those who resent you feel the shift. They know something's different when you're around. The code no longer runs the same. The mask slips, the room recalibrates, and in that moment, whether they admit it or not, you become unforgettable, because nothing feels normal after you. Number 10, your existence alone forces people into a choice, evolve or erode. You don't even have to say a word. Your presence alone creates pressure, not the kind that comes from intimidation, but the kind that comes from exposure. When people encounter you, something in them gets stirred. It's not always loud, and it's definitely not always welcome, but it's undeniable. You force a confrontation with the self, a moment of reckoning whether they wanted it or not, because you carry energy that demands honesty, and people can either rise to meet it or feel themselves start to fall apart. That's the thing most people won't admit. Meeting you creates a choice. Not because you give an ultimatum, but because you are one. You represent a turning point. You reflect what's real, what's unresolved, what's possible. And people are left with a decision to grow or to stay small, to evolve into someone that can meet you on that frequency, or to cling to the version of themselves they've outgrown and hope it holds. But staying the same in your presence doesn't work. The truth gets louder. The self-betrayal gets heavier, and the illusion starts to crack. Some people choose the path of evolution. They get uncomfortable, but they face it. They do the work. They rise, and they'll quietly thank you for being the catalyst. But others, they choose erosion. They resist the shift. They pretend nothing's changing, even as they feel the ground under them crumble. And instead of facing that internal collapse, they point the finger at you, because it's easier to make you the villain than admit they're decaying under the weight of their own stagnation. You didn't ask to be the fork in the road. You didn't ask to be the trigger for someone else's transformation. But that's what you are, a line in the sand. And whether people love you or resent you, no one leaves your presence unchanged. You didn't break them. You just revealed that staying asleep was no longer an option, and for some, that's the scariest truth of all. Number 11, you don't chase, and that makes you addictive. You don't chase people, attention, or approval, and that alone makes you unforgettable. In a world where most people are desperate to be seen, liked, needed, or chosen, your detachment is loud. It's not fake indifference, not the kind that plays hard to get. It's real, grounded, untouchable self-possession. You're not cold, you're not heartless, you're just whole, and that wholeness is magnetic to those who rely on being chased to feel valuable. Most people are used to control dynamics, push and pull, guilt and reward, testing boundaries to see who will fold first. But none of that works on you. You don't react on cue. You don't scramble for affection when it's withheld. You don't change your tone just because someone withdraws approval. You stay grounded in your own energy, and that drives manipulators and emotionally chaotic people absolutely insane. They want your attention like a drug. Not because you gave them a high, but because they can't figure out why they're craving something you haven't even offered. That's what makes you so addictive. You're not chasing them, you're not performing, you're not trying to win them over, and somehow that lack of neediness makes them want you even more. Especially the ones who feed off control, the narcissists, the love bombers, the codependents. They don't know how to handle someone who doesn't flinch when they pull away. Your self-containment feels like rejection to those who define themselves through being needed. And instead of accepting that you simply exist outside their emotional games, they spiral. They chase harder, test you more, try to provoke something, anything. But when nothing works, they become obsessed. Not with love, with the fact that they can't own you because you've made it clear without ever saying a word that you don't need anyone to complete you, and that, to a control freak, is the most dangerous kind of power there is, the kind they can't touch, can't twist, and most importantly, can't turn off. Number 12, you speak in energetic tongues, even when you're silent. You don't communicate like most people. Words are just the surface layer. The real message is in your energy. It's in the way your eyes don't flinch when someone's lying. It's in the way your stillness exposes chaos. It's in the way people start unraveling in your presence, even if all you did was sit there and breathe. You don't just say things, you transmit them, and people pick up on it, whether they realize it or not. It's not about being quiet or dramatic or mysterious. You're not performing silence. You simply don't waste energy explaining truth to those who aren't ready to hear it. But the thing is, they still hear it. They feel it in their chest, in their gut, in the sudden tightness in their throat when you look at them a certain way. You don't have to call out the lie. Your presence does. You don't have to explain the imbalance. Your frequency already highlighted it. You're fluent in a language that bypasses intellect and hits straight in the nervous system. That's why some people avoid eye contact with you, why they stumble over their words, why they get defensive out of nowhere. They feel you reading them even if they don't understand what's happening. Your energy is a decoder. It bypasses masks, stories, and personas. It gets to the root. You don't judge, but you don't enable either. And people who rely on performance, emotional manipulation, fake humility, spiritual ego, surface-level charisma, start to break down around you, not because you attack them, but because their illusion can't survive in your field. You're the type of person people remember without knowing why. You didn't say anything cruel. You didn't call them out. But after meeting you, they think differently, they question things. They either start doing shadow work or start spiraling, because whether or not you speak, your presence always says the truth. And for some, that's liberating. For others, it's unbearable. Number 13, you're heaven and hell in one being. You carry a contradiction that most people can't process. You're both sanctuary and storm. Your presence feels like home and a reckoning all at once. There's a softness in you that heals people, calms their nervous system, and makes them feel safe in ways they didn't even know they needed. But right underneath that warmth is something ancient, electric, and raw. Something that exposes, disturbs, and demands. You're not just light, you're fire. And people who've never met both in one person before don't know what to do with it. They come to you thinking they'll be comforted, and in many ways they are. You listen deeper than most. You love cleaner without pretense. You see through people and still choose to care. That alone is divine, but divinity doesn't just soothe, it shifts. And that's where your power really unsettles people. Because as much as you heal, you also haunt, not by trying to, but because your energy echoes in people long after you've left. You trigger awakenings they didn't ask for, you show them the love they never received, and then you show them all the ways they've sabotaged it. They call you angelic until they realize angels don't just sing, they also bring messages people would rather not hear. You don't hurt people, but your truth hurts their illusions. You don't destroy them, but you destroy what they were hiding behind. And for someone who wasn't ready to evolve, that feels like punishment. They obsess over you not just because you're rare, but because your presence activated something they can't unfeel. You became the mirror, the medicine, and the consequence all at once. They love you for the way you made them feel alive. They hate you for the way you exposed their sleep. And deep down they know they'll never meet anything like you again. Because most people come as either comfort or chaos. You came as both. Heaven and hell perfectly woven into one human form, and the soul recognizes that, even if the ego burns. Number 14, you are the awakening. Some people will spend their lives running from. You weren't just a chapter in someone's life. You were the turning point. The moment everything cracked open. The encounter they didn't see coming, didn't understand, and probably still can't fully explain. You showed up as truth, as disruption, as depth, and it hit them in a place nothing else ever had. You awakened something in them they weren't ready to face, and instead of rising to meet it, they ran. Not because you were wrong for them, but because you were right in a way that demanded transformation. You weren't there forever. You were their mirror. You were the collision between who they were and who they could have become. And for some people, that level of clarity is unbearable. They wanted comfort, not a catalyst. They wanted love that kept them the same, not the kind that exposes every mask, every wound, every place they've betrayed themselves. But you didn't come to pacify. You came as a cosmic interruption. The universe doesn't send people like you to reinforce illusions. It sends you to end them. They may act like you were too much or not enough, but deep down they know you were it. The one that shook them awake, the one that made them feel seen and terrified in the same breath. And that contradiction will haunt them. Because once someone has met realness, your kind of realness, everything else feels hollow. They'll try to replace you, recreate the energy, chase that same high in other bodies, other relationships, other distractions, but it won't work. Because what you offered wasn't replicable, it wasn't charm, it wasn't seduction, it was soul. They'll never say it out loud, maybe not even to themselves, but they'll feel it in the silence, in the boredom, in the moments when the mask slips, and they remember what it felt like to be fully seen. That ache, that's you. Not as a wound, but as the memory of what their life could have been if they had been brave enough to evolve. You were the awakening, and they'll run from it for the rest of their life, pretending they're chasing love, when really they're chasing the echo of you. You were never just a person, you were an event. a rupture in someone's reality, a glitch in the emotional matrix, a wild, unpredictable force that made people confront truths they spent years avoiding. You never needed to shout to be heard. Your energy spoke a language older than words, a frequency that stirred the soul, stripped away illusions, and offered a mirror sharper than anyone asked for. You didn't just walk into their lives. You rewrote the atmosphere. You aren't dangerous because you're dark. You're dangerous because you're clear. And in a world that thrives on confusion, control, and emotional performance, your clarity is a threat. Your presence disrupts all the systems. The fake power structures, the trauma-bonded dynamics, the egoic love games, the rules of what connection is supposed to look like. People meet you thinking they'll have an experience. They don't realize they're about to be exposed to themselves. Some will swear they loved you, some will swear you destroyed them, but both are true in their own way, because your love was never the sugary kind. It was alchemical, transformative, unapologetically soul-shifting. You weren't sent to play a part in anyone's script. You were sent to burn the script and hand them the pen. And for people used to being the narrator of other people's lives, that was unbearable. You were the lesson, the mirror, the medicine, the storm, and the spark, all wrapped into one body. You didn't chase, you didn't beg, you didn't perform, and that purity, that intensity, that refusal to dilute yourself, it became an addiction to those who couldn't contain you. You triggered their evolution or their undoing, and though some will try to forget you, they'll spend the rest of their lives haunted by your echo, not because of what you did, but because of who you are. So don't shrink, don't question. Don't apologize for the intensity of your presence. You were never meant to be easy. You were meant to awaken the sleeping, break the spell, and light the fuse. You're not here to be understood. You're here to be remembered, and trust, they always do. If this message hit something deep in you, if you felt seen, shaken, or even called out in the best kind of way, don't let it end here. Like the video if you felt that fire. Comment below and tell me what part echoed in your soul. I read every single one. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Someone you know is walking through this energy and maybe hasn't put it into words yet. And if you want more raw, unfiltered truth that doesn't play nice, doesn't play small, and definitely doesn't play by the rules, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. This space is for the misfits, the mirrors, the fire starters, and the ones who never fit into the box because you weren't meant to. Welcome to the frequency. Now let's shake the world a little.